Crusades was always part of my DNA. It was one of those periods in history when I was at school that was most interesting because it was so colorful and violent. And when I was at school, of course, I was less enamored by the idea of politics and religion. I was more interested in the kind of cowboy stuff, you know, the armor and the swords and the violence and the fighting. And also, as all of us probably, assuming that the Muslims were the bad guys.
One of the things actually Ridley did talk about was that he always felt that if there was an era of epic making, that the Crusades would have to be covered. It's such a monumental time in history, and it's never been explored before.
It's a very important period, and it's very relevant to today to understand this period. It's totally comes up to date with what's going on in the world, so it's creepily topical.
Ridley was always, I know one of the subjects he's always wanted to make was a Crusades film, going, right back, since I've worked with him, there's always been the talk of wanting to do a film about the Crusades and detailing that struggle and that period of history.
Right, stand by to shoot, guys.
I really like to create worlds. I really enjoy that. It's really fun to set up the idea of creating this enormous proscenium. But in this case, I'm building Jerusalem.
He's battling for his film. He knows what he wants, and I think he's known it for a long time. He wants to do something that's very special. He doesn't want to just pass by. This one needs to be right.
Ridley walked into my office one day and he said, just out of nowhere, for the first time I had never heard a word about it, he said, I want to make a movie about the Crusades. And that was it. And I said, oh, okay, got it. And then walked away. And then later we talked about, what do you want to do exactly? And he just wanted to do that period. He had always been interested in the Middle Ages in Europe and the feeling of that time. He'd been interested in knights and who they are and what they do. But we were never sure what exactly about the Crusades. We knew it was hundreds of years, and we knew there were hundreds or thousands of stories that could be told, but we weren't exactly sure which one it was going to be. We were submitted a lot of projects about the Crusades, several books, so we heard a couple of pitches, but Ridley really wanted to do his own. He wanted to fashion it with the writer on his own and start really from scratch.
I'm definitely a frustrated writer, and I wouldn't attempt to do it because I couldn't write as well as the writers I now can afford to hire. Life's too short, for me. These guys have their talent, and I respect that.
We knew we had to find the right writer to capture the period, and then we figured that we'd work with the writer to figure out which story to tell.
I had a script called Tripoli sitting around for about 8 years, and it finally got to Ridley, and he said he was going to make it.
Tripoli, of course, is about 1805, where Britain is at war with Napoleon. Napoleon is kind of ruling the waves, certainly in the Mediterranean, and has just sold from Louisiana to the Pacific for $11 million because he needed the money. And Thomas Jefferson has now emptied his coffers of everything he's got. So in the Mediterranean, there's very few American ships, but you've got a lot of trading ships in the Mediterranean. And at this particular time, there was a character in Tripoli called the Pasha Beyshov, and he was running basically an extortion racket, piracy. So this is why the Barbary Coast is associated with piracy. And that would have been with Russell Crowe, who's going to play this man who was the vice consul for Tripoli, who decided to actually conduct his own foreign policy personally, because the United States couldn't afford to, didn't want to get involved. He drummed up his own little private army and tried to go against the Pasha Beyshov. That was a fantastic project.
So Ridley was shooting Matchstick Men, and every day after he would wrap, he would come back into the office and he would deal with the team that was working on Tripoli, because we had full-blown team set up. We had Arthur Max, production designer, Terry, Bronco. We were doing budget, schedule, casting, and we had a huge warehouse set up with drawings, designs, models, because we were going to have to build an entire city on the coast of Morocco.
This is just one set, though, ready?
Okay.
Lights first.
Shit. Wow.
That was like changing rooms, actually.
Okay. That's called Bill. That's called the dream comes true.
Not yet.
This room is 100 by 100. We can use the inner courtyard, this, and we do the Pasha Pasha at night. You'll never recognize it.
So Ridley would finish shooting in the afternoon early on Matchstick, come and we'd work on Tripoli till late at night, and then we'd do story meetings also all weekend.
During the meeting, he asked me if I had anything about the Crusades. And, you know, the usual nightmare would be that you didn't, you know, sort of like not having your homework. But as it happened, I did have something.
He's an expert on this particular, it's a passion for him. And so when I went to him, I didn't realize that. He said, oh my God, this is what I really want to do.
The minute Ridley said Crusades and did I have anything, the first thing that popped into my mind was Baldwin of Jerusalem in a silver mask, which had been, you know, haunting me since I was about 14 years old when I first read about the guy. And you always store things away. You never know what's going to be useful later. You never know, for example, when Ridley Scott's going to say you have anything about the Crusades.
Tripoli was a fantastic writing sample. We knew from Tripoli that if he could write that script, that he could give us a Crusades. Tripoli almost happened 3 times. I think we had 2 green lights, and occurrences just kept happening that would stop the movie at the last second. Arthur Max had been working on it for quite a long time. We had all the locations, we had done all the scouts, we had spent quite a bit of money on it, and we were ready to go.
We actually built in the Derna Castle, the fort. I was building, I got that close. I was building this 4-acre fort. Cut a long story short, it flatlined, didn't happen.
3 different times, 3 different situations stopped it in its tracks. So by the 3rd time, really was ready to make a movie. And exactly at that moment, Bill delivered his first draft of Kingdom of Heaven. It was long, and Ridley and I took it home for the weekend. It was Thanksgiving weekend. And he read it, the first draft, the first time, and he said, this is it, I'm making it, I love this. I'm making this movie. The other thing that was great about Bill is he loved research, and he read every book there was about the Crusades, whether it was from libraries. We bought him every one we could find, and he really made himself an expert in the field before he even sat down to come up with a concept.
I already had a pretty good library to begin with, and during the research process, Scott Free sent me everything I asked for, which in the end probably amounted to, you know, a couple of $1,000s worth of books, including some pretty hard to find stuff, which was nice. But it's all original sourcing. I mean, it seems to me the only way to write a historical piece.
Bill had known about this period, he said, from when he was younger, and there was one thing that attracted him, which was this concept of a leper king. Just visually, what is that about? How can you be a king and be a leper at the same time? So there was that aspect that made him look at that period. And then looking closer at that period, it was there was détente going on, where you had everyone living in a city and trying to hold on to this tenuous peace.
This period was interesting because it was an interval of, if not peace, at least cohabitation, you know, accommodation would probably be the better word, between the 2 civilizations in the East at that time. And it's simply more interesting than, you know, a period of outright war.
So once he decided that would be the period of time, then we started exploring who were the parties involved, who was in Jerusalem, who was causing trouble, who was trying to keep the peace.
You have Saladin, you've got a wonderful character called Baldwin, who was the leper king, a great character, his sister Sibylla. and some other wonderful people such as Renaud, who was really a bad guy, and Guy de Lusignan, who was also really a bad guy. And we're just before Richard the Lionheart.
And then once he figured out that that would be the time, the very most difficult thing was who was the lead character and who was going to take us through that journey. Balian was the guy who surrendered the city of Jerusalem. There's not a lot of information out there about what else he did, so we did dramatize a lot of that. But we knew that he had a relationship with Saladin, that they had conversations before the surrender, and that he did surrender. So those were the three things. You have Balian surrendering, Jerusalem détente, and the Leper King. And those were the three things that we talked about before he started writing. And then once we got that draft, then we had a lot of work to do.
I can't remember whether it was 186 pages or 168 pages. I think it was one of those, but I do know it scared the shit out of everybody. And it was quite long. I put everything in.
Obviously, when you're making a movie, you have to dramatize things, and you can't have every single detail and every single character and every event that happened during a period of time. So that was a lot of the work we had to do from the first draft into the 70 other after that. But when you deliver the script for the budget, you know, the first thing everybody looks at is how long is the script and how long is the movie going to be. So we had a parenthetical meeting one day because Bill loves parentheticals. And they're actually really charming and funny and informative for probably an actor or a reader. It makes the read enjoyable, but every piece of dialogue had a parenthetical in front of it. So we went through one day and we took out every parenthetical in the movie, and no, I wasn't very popular that day, but we got the page count down by like 20 pages. So, you know, it didn't affect the movie, but at least, you know, the people who were paying attention to those things, it made a difference, I think.
My job is to give them as much help as possible in terms of how I suddenly see some of the characters, or say, yeah, we can do this, but more of this, more of that. It's really about enriching the process. On 53, King says, and when one day I'm helpless, perhaps you'll protect me, a beat. What happens if he says, so, let's play, right?
Yeah.
Yes. He says, it's your move first, something like it's your move first, and I will explain the implications as we go.
Right.
So when he comes out into the corridor, he's been there fucking hours, which is interesting.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You wonder what went on in the room with the king, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to...
It implied a hell of a lot more education.
Absolutely.
Right?
For him to play chess.
Yeah.
Particularly if he looks baffled and the king smiles knowing he's baffled and says, don't worry, I'll explain every move as you go.
One of the things that I find most useful and interesting that Ridley does when we're developing screenplays is he starts carding it. He brings in a huge bulletin board and he takes the cards and he personally writes out every single scene or sometimes even shot in the movie. It's how he begins to visualize what he's going to be shooting. And it really helps to figure out what the movie really is starting to look like in structure form. And at the end of the day, we take the cards down, make a photocopy, give them to Bill and say, go write these cards. And it was the way of sort of taking notes in the meeting, but it was also really the way Ridley starts digesting the story and really finding out what he loves, because there's certain things that always stay in and the things that are movable and shiftable. The other thing that he does is while he's writing cards, he has the draft of the script and he goes through every single line, every line of description, of dialogue, and he writes on almost every line. Every page is covered with his handwriting. And we would keep all of those drafts. And by the time we got up to something like 70 drafts, he'd say, let's get that draft from October of last year. And he remembered everything that was ever written in that script. So it was always about getting everything in that he wanted to have there. And still, of course, keeping it cohesive and streamlined.
Working with Ridley is like a dream come true. You know, if you're going to work in the film business, you want to be working with Ridley Scott. And especially on movies like this.
Bill was really good in the meetings with Ridley. Most writers really enjoy being with the director who's visualizing what they're putting on paper. So, for example, if Bill writes the Kerouac sequence, what Ridley would do in a story meeting is start drawing it and saying, okay, well, what do you mean? Well, where does this go and what's happening over here? So suddenly you get drawings also on the table. You've got cards, you've got the script, you've got drawings, and Ridley's drawing everything, you know. How does it look like this? Does it look like that? And then Bill would realize, oh, well, okay, I need to adjust that in the script.
So they can disappear?
Like they can, yeah, they would disappear.
These dunes are maybe 40, 50 feet high.
Oh, all right.
While we're working on story, Ridley always starts pulling his key players together. Even, I think, before the studio really got a good look at the script, Ridley was already kind of sending it to Arthur, to Terry, you know, to start to think about where we could shoot it, how it would look. And when he submitted the script to Fox, he wrote a really simple letter saying he was very excited for them to read the script, and this was going to be his next movie. So that was an exciting day and a nerve-wracking day, but they were really happy with the script, and things started really progressing after that.
Reading a script is everything, and from my point of view, it sets me up with the way I've got to work out my team as well, of how many people I'm going to need to deal with the piece.
When you're reading it, you actually get really excited because you know it's going to be fantastic, and you know it's going to be big, and you know it's going to be great. And so you're more excited than daunted, actually, and you're really excited because you can't wait to get stuck into it, because you just know what it's going to be at the end.
People spend their entire lives studying a very small part of the whole tableau, the tapestry, if you will, of that world, and we're given 24 weeks to recreate it all. I've worked with Ridley for so long now, and we know each other's preferences. The best way we've found to work together and to get started, really, is to just throw up lots of images on a wall and get as much reference which relates to the period as possible, and zero in on things that kind of pique your interest and stimulate the imagination a bit.
The research we did on this covered every aspect from, of course, one kicks off with the internet, but we went to the British Museum, we went to every museum and library in the UK. We went to the most fantastic Leeds Armoury, which has armour from literally the year dot. And we were able to be very, very inspired from that particular armory.
There were certain books that Arthur found that were critical between him and Ridley in trying to figure out the way the movie would look. Like Jean-Paul Gérôme was really important. Doré was important.
We went back to our old friends in the 18th and 19th century, the Orientalists, and took the same approach with Kingdom of Heaven as we did on Gladiator, which was not to try and recreate a documentary-style, museum-standard Jerusalem, but to do one based on romantic impression and imagination. One of the largest sources of reference, however, was in the Museum of the Chateau of Versailles, just outside of Paris. They had a whole room devoted to the Crusades in a romantic style.
The Cal de Crusade are a series of paintings which were based on the Crusades. They were painted much after the 12th century, but they're these wonderful large paintings which have a tremendous amount of detail in them, so we use those quite a lot for flags, banners, horse dressing, and I know that Costume used them quite a lot for the costume reference.
I went a bit on a whim because I knew they had this one Crusades room, but I didn't know if there was 2 paintings there or 20. And it was 5 rooms and 100 paintings, all 10 by 15. And mainly painted in the 17th century, but that's Ridley's take on the Crusades anyway, that era.
We began here in Los Angeles in, I want to say, the summertime. I seem to recall it was July, and they weren't going to film until, I think, January, so obviously Balian was the big question for a long time.
Ridley had worked with Orlando on Black Hawk Down, and in his mind he was a lot younger because it was several years before and it was a smaller part, and we couldn't really get our hands on him because he was shooting Troy in Mexico. And I think it was the day after he wrapped Troy, we called him and asked him to come in.
I wasn't necessarily looking for another sort of epic, but an opportunity to do a polar opposite to what I did with Paris was really exciting to me. And to work with Ridley Scott, to be the lead in a Ridley Scott movie would be amazing. So when I met him, I just was, Bill Monahan wrote an incredible script and I really responded to it, and we talked at great length about it. And he said to me, well, will you come in tomorrow and, read on camera? And I was like, okay. So I had like 3 scenes, and, we finished talking at like 8 at night, and I ended up having to be in at 9 in the morning for like 3 scenes, huge scenes, that go on camera. So I'm standing on set with this chainmail and dirt on the face, blood on the face, a beard, and just thinking, wow, I'm screen testing for Ridley Scott, and I just hope that I can get this one right.
He hadn't had any time with the script. He didn't even have any time to digest it, but he was incredible. And he read a couple of scenes. He and Ridley get along really well, and Ridley felt great about it, but he hadn't had a chance to even look at the footage. We were in a soundstage, and we shot the test on a video, and what we did was we shook hands, thanks Orlando, that was fantastic, and then we took the tape across the street on the lot to the screening room, and there we saw, for the first time, we saw him on the screen, and we were thinking, well, this is really cool, and all the executives came in and watched, and it was a party. Everybody was very excited and pretty much felt like he's really gonna be the guy. That, I think, was probably the defining moment of when he was cast for Balian.
Once we knew that it was Orlando, we were able to zero in on who'd play his father, and then to really focus on who'd be the best woman to play Sibylla, and then from that, who's the best man to play Guy, and all of that. So it all began to, much like a puzzle, which is how I consider the job anyway, who seems to fit the best in these parts once you have that centerpiece.
The 3 Muslims were very important, and they were very important to me that they weren't the usual suspects, English or American playing, Muslim.
Ridley was determined to cast Muslims as Muslims. He really wanted there not to be, a backlash or any feathers ruffled because we went, it wasn't authentic. And we searched in Paris because there's a large Arabic community there and a lot of Arabic actors there. And then somebody had a contact in Egypt. And I remember seeing an email from a colleague saying that she had just learned about the first film ever made in Yemen, and she was going to find out more about who those actors were and whatnot. But I thought we ended up with just fantastic actors. I mean, Alexander Siddig, who played Imad, was someone that everyone sort of knew, I guess, if you looked closely. But the actor playing Saladin, this is a sort of famous Syrian actor that was, I think, brand new to certainly American audiences and probably a lot of the world.
Ridley looked at so many actors, and a lot of times not even in English. He would look at Arab television or movies and just look at faces of actors. Some of them reading, some of them just in scenes from other things, and he just would say no every time. No, no, no. He knew exactly what he was looking for. He wanted somebody really who looked elegant and intelligent and deep and wise. And the minute he saw Ghassan on tape, he said, that's him. I mean, I don't even know if he said anything before he said, that's the guy. We moved our pre-production over to London, and Ridley was mostly based in London, and Branco was based in Morocco, and Arthur was in Morocco and Spain. So they were building Jerusalem, they were building Balian's Forge and Village, and we were getting photos of that and reports of that. Meanwhile, we were still working on the script all the way through pre-production in London.
What I'm thinking is, if he's going to take the glove off, he's going to maybe undo and then have an impatient tear the bandage off, hold the hand out, which is going to have a sink ring on it, and he's going to say, "I am Jerusalem, kiss this, mate." And I think Reynolds mad enough to go, yeah.
Oh!
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Now you're actually...
Gross. Fox had really important notes about streamlining Balian. For them, it was stay focused on the thrust of the movie. We're following this guy, and are you really sure that you need this story to tell this story? And so in the first draft and all the early drafts of the script, Sibylla had a son. And this story for Sibylla was incredible and heartbreaking, and was one of Ridley's favorite ideas in the story. And so we always had a draft with Sibylla having a son, and how that played into the politics of everything that was going on in Jerusalem at the time. And one of the notes from the studio that we took very seriously was, is Sibylla's story critical to Balian's story? We need to figure out the Sibylla kid thing.
When you think about it, all the scenes with her and the child are separate. There's not one scene with her and Balian. The only thing you have is the coronation, where you'll have the lineup, and you'll have probably virtually the same thing. It'll mean a
But
half
things
day
she
there.
talks about with other characters, like if she talks to the king about the boy, if the king talks to somebody else about the boy.
I know.
Scenes between her and Balian about the boy.
I know. But if I thought about things like that, I would never have made a movie. We're going to cost it. It'll be in the budget, within the budget, and I think it'll be a better movie because of it.
Ridley was a lion in defense of this script, but you're often writing things out simply to show people they won't work. So before we were able to go home for Christmas, I had to prepare two separate drafts of the movie, one with the Sibylla's son in and one with Sibylla's son out.
So we had a boy version and a no boy version. In fact, as late as 2 weeks before we started shooting, we had two drafts of the script, the boy version and the no boy version.
The studio said, here's our version of the script where this script doesn't include the boy. Yeah, okay, fine. So this is the script we're doing. No, we're not doing this script, but this is the script that the budget's based on now, and this is the script that the studio have approved. So then we get the script which, Ridley wants to shoot, and in a sense, in our experience, he will shoot, because, he's the producer-director, and he'd be the best judge of it. He's who we work for, and this is what we're going to prepare.
It's a very radical difference. It makes a difference in the schedule. It makes a difference in casting.
This script had, the boy in and had the, all the stuff and the funeral and the cathedral. This script didn't. So we have this script, right? So this script, right, we're going to give to him because he doesn't know the boy's happening yet, because we're still thinking we're going to do it, but we can't tell him. So this script we're going to give to him, though, because he's got to read it, because he's going to be the boy, maybe. And he's going to be the boy's mother, so we better give him the script, because she needs to know what the boy happens to the boy. So we became in the pre-production just before Christmas, when we were kind of, we were sort of dancing around and trying to get this, the arguments of the boy were happening, where the studio wanted the film to be a certain amount of days, and if we added the boy, it would add, say, 5 days to the movie.
Ridley himself was struggling with it and wasn't sure, and finally, I think it was Janty said, if we're gonna have a boy, we're gonna have a coronation, I need to have an outfit. I'm making it. And Gina J said, if we're gonna have a boy in 2 weeks, I'm casting him. And then Adam said, well, I've got to get it into the schedule. So everyone came up with contingency plans for if there was a boy. And so Ridley decided that he would see how it felt after he shot it. So for him, why take a chance? Let's shoot it and let's see how it works both ways. I thought that once it was shot, that was it, but the conversations kept going after that.
We first saw Orlando just before Christmas when he came down to our workshop. We had to really kind of explain to him how swords were made. He'd done a little bit of that on other films where he'd played a blacksmith, but we took him through a sequence of what he had to do around the forge, mainly safety, because the forge was real. So it was that sort of not being distracted and picking up a hot piece of metal, you know, while you're in mid-sentence or mid-flow. So we kind of started to get the safety aspect into him, and then using the tools and in what sequence.
If you're doing that, you kind of, like that. So what you're doing is you're really relaxed, but you're holding it and you're like that. You know, it looks, it just looks a little bit, that's it.
Yeah, you and I both got right for something.
What you're going to do is when you break
you just spread the cords around, make sure they're all round the edge of the sword and well covered with coal.
The rehearsal process was really very useful, and I think, you know, for everyone to come to grasp with the dialogue and with the text.
We were in a hall. I'm not sure whether it was a church hall or a community hall of some kind in London. And we were around a very small table and we discussed things about the nature of the story in its entirety, some of the technical aspects, and of course the characterization as well. But mostly we plotted the arc of the story and the characters within that. So it gave us an overall picture of what was going on. And also it gave us an opportunity to sit opposite one another, or at least the people that we were most working with, and just hear what they had to say, connect our individual goals with one another.
But if you move against Saladin, this army will be destroyed and the city left defenseless.
When I wish a blacksmith is the marshal of Jerusalem, I will let him know. You will not join this army, my Lord Defender. So.
This was the first time that I actually, being now the first assistant with Ridley, I was able to, you know, sit in when we were having these, the rehearsals in London, and it was really interesting. It was fascinating to see him, the way he developed with the actors, you know, in a sort of very relaxed way, reading around the script and letting the actors sort of talk about how they see it, and then, you know, and giving them the room and space to talk, but very much then saying, you know, coming in with how he saw it and stuff. And it was an interesting process.
And the storyboards that surrounded us, as I recall, were very exact. You get a real sense of what kind of film it was, and it triggered the imagination. And we discussed things about how close it was to historical fact and how that subject actually came into it at all, and made sure that everybody was on the same page.
In this fight, I like the idea that you, in the middle of this sudden onslaught with this, there's crossbows from the left and there's arrows from the right. So you know, this is what I think with the machine mind, knows a crossbow is a fucking son of a bitch to reload. It takes you about a minute. So they all make the mistake of firing together. So these crossbows go boom, and the arrows flick in from the light. Okay. He turns with his sword, has the sword, runs into the bushes where he knows the crossbowmen are, and we hurtle through the trees to see one guy. To load a crossbow, you don't go like that. You've got a foot loop, you've got to pull it up like this. Yeah. There's a huge spring. Then you've got to get a bolt in. The whole thing takes a minute. So he knows he's got about 40 seconds to cross the ground, get through the trees, find the guy, and cut him down. Yeah. So that'll be Billion's inclination to go for the crossbowman.
Ridley had pretty much cast everybody that he wanted to, but he also was quite keen to get some rehearsal time in with the actors, as many as he could get together. So I used to come in on these because it was a good opportunity for me to meet everybody and get the actors in the chair and maybe try a few things out.
There was some discussion that Guy would be blonde, and the idea of that Aryan mentality was going to be put forward, but and that was a nice conceptual idea.
Scandinavian blonde, you ever see a Finnish blonde, right? Which the colour bleach at the ends, right?
Yeah. That's very blonde.
Yeah. I kind of like that, going with the kind of gear armor he's wearing.
But Aldo, he had a favourite wig, and we put that on first, actually, which is the one that was in the film, and it just made a lot of sense.
And then we tried hundreds of others, and Ridley was, I think, a little adverse to going with the dark, long locks and the goatee of sorts, and you could understand why. But at the same time, I think we used it very well. It became, along that sort of foppish, rakish personality, a very useful tool. It suggested arrogance, and that he probably spent a lot of time in the mirror than one normally might. And it could be used. It served the purpose well, and there was a degree of magic that occurred when we put it on. It was just, that was the one.
I think they were all really excited about doing such a large period film. Who wouldn't, putting on all that costume with a sword, with his horse, and go down and be in the Crusades for 6 months? You know, who wouldn't want to do that?
Maybe half of the film was shot in Spain. We went to the northern part of Spain, Huesca, and then we also went down to the southern part of Spain, to Seville.
Huesca in northern Spain was probably one of the most beautiful places I've ever been to in my life. Ridley had chosen it for this extraordinary panoramic you could see for 50 miles. It had the most exquisite castle just perched on the edge of the mountain, and it had the best sunsets and sunrises I've ever seen. It was perfect for his concept of France in the 12th century.
You're starting the story in medieval France, and it's the Dark Ages. There was a mini ice age at that time, as well as sort of crops failed, and there were terrible stories of people eating children and all sorts of things. And so, this was a really dark, dark place, the Dark Ages. And so, being alive in the Middle Ages wasn't that much fun, and so that had a look to it. And we've shot that on this very primeval landscape that hasn't really changed that much at all. We could do some very big wide shots without any problem at all. I mean, there were towns and things down there, but really the landscape hadn't changed. But it felt very, very old.
I remember everyone saying at the time, because it's a Ridley Scott film, people will think that's CGI, that view. You'll never believe that that's a real view, but it was. It was amazing to go to work every day and just look out over that view.
Just stretched. It seemed all over Spain. This incredible views. And the sunsets were just staggering.
And to be in this little village, it felt like being back in the Middle Ages. It was amazing.
It was quite a big village, and it's a very important part of the film because it's where we establish Balian.
It's a lovely set, very cold, very cold. You've never seen so many people crammed into the forge, It's not that they needed to be there, but it was the warmest place.
We're gonna shoot it. Settle and action. Cut.
I remember feeling quite nervous about lying down on the forge with flames around me, because I think in the film they've CGI'd a lot of flames over my body and my face and everything, but there were actually flames in the forge as well. That was quite scary. But I remember everyone being almost obsessive about, well, they were obsessive about safety and all that kind of stuff, so you didn't feel like anything was going to happen to you. And then watching the stunt guy doing the actual, on fire and having to run around and all that, and that was extraordinary. Only ever having seen that on film before, to actually see it up close is amazing.
I want the paramedics truck parked right out front with a clear way to get out of here. Effects will determine if they need the fire department in. Just be at the ready lines charged. If anyone, when we're ready to go, feels they're in an unsafe position, let us know. We'll make it safe.
Clear out, guys. We're not needed in here. Clear out, please. We're not needed. Clear out.
The main thing I remember is having to wander around with a sword sticking out of my stomach and going to have lunch with it and that kind of stuff. That was quite weird. And there's only so many times you can hear the jokes about, you know, people going, that must hurt. Because I had this sort of contraption stuck to me where the sword sticks out and at the back as well, like Steve Martin with the arrow through the head, you know, through my stomach. And I'd have to wander around with that a lot.
Put the pigs out. Keep them over there. Where's the other? Bring the chickens in now. Bring the chickens in. Guys, all clear out.
Right. Ready? Come on. Ready? Come on. No, come on. Ready? Come on. Ready and shoot!
Well, my understanding was that filming in northern Spain was partly because they were guaranteed snow.
You needed the weather to get the atmosphere and the breath, you know, people's breath. And I remember there are films that you watch and you see the breath and you just think, oh, that was fantastic, because you just know it was cold.
Of course, we got there was no snow. So we had this fantastic Hollywood moment where snow was created and huge machines pumping out large amounts of snow, which was great.
I'm just laying down a bit of artificial snow to simulate a bit of light frosting and light snow. We're using a paper product and merely applying it with this hose and some fresh water on top, and it just creates like a little paper mache and sticks to the ground. It's biodegradable, it's readily available, and it's harmless, but it doesn't melt, which the real stuff does.
Here we go. Bring up the snow. Bring up the snow. Stand by to shoot. Quiet outside. Don't walk around, guys. Lock it up.
Too much snow. And then I think the following night, we were about to shoot the scene where I get killed in the forge, and suddenly the snow came down for real, and I've never seen anything like it in my life.
I got this one phone call from someone who was on the standby saying, "We're snowed in." And I said, "You're snowed in," as I was sitting back having my lovely cappuccino in the warm sunshine of Seville. "Snowed in? Oh no, what do you mean snowed in?" "Well, we're actually stuck up on the set and they're not going to let any cars go down, and it's quite dark and it's cold and I really don't know what to do because I haven't got a spare pair of knickers with me." And I said, "Well, what are you going to do?" "Well, I don't know, but I'll just let you know what happens." And they did get stuck, but they all managed to get down eventually. But I think it was quite scary, actually. I mean, it sounds funny now, but it wasn't at the time. I think they were all really like thinking, well, what are we going to do, you know, stuck up the side of this mountain. We went there because there was this beautiful castle, which was in the most wonderful situation. It was on the side of a mountain, it had fabulous views, it was incredible.
I mean, the castle itself was awesome. Without any dressing or weaponry or people inside it, the castle itself was fantastic. It was an awesome sight, perched on top of that hill.
It was so beautiful. It was breathtaking. I mean, it's as if, honestly, it was built to be filmed in a movie at some point in its life.
And what of Jerusalem?
Jerusalem?
In peril, my lord, as always. We have stood there against the Saracens for over 100 years.
The banquet is really big. It's for more or less 20 or 30 person, and the look has to be like 1,200 more or less, and so it's very different as the actual way to cook.
Very fine. And yet, you do not drink.
It has to be eatable? Edible.
Well, we went from Loire and Huesca in the north, and we sort of travelled down to Seville. And Seville's an incredibly beautiful city.
I knew I wanted Moorish architecture, so I hit Seville for the Pilatos and the Alcazar, because that architecture is a little bit after, but pretty well on period. I was using that architecture for the palaces in Jerusalem, which is then mixed with the stone, more Romanesque architecture. That works great.
They were absolutely a joy to work in. How privileged were we to be able to shoot in those stunning surroundings.
Right. Okay, let's go again. Do you mind doing one more?
Here we go. Clear shooting, guys.
That is perfect on Danny's camera. That is absolutely the way to be.
Great, and good from there. And cameras.
54, take 5, eh, camera mark?
B marker.
C camera.
And action.
Come forward. No, do not kneel. Your father was one of my great teachers from as long ago as I can remember. I'm glad to meet Godfrey's son. You know that man you killed in the desert? Though a Saracen, was also one of my father's friends. He taught me to hunt with hawks when I was a boy. He was there when, practicing with the other boys, my arm was cut. And it was he, not my father's physicians, who noticed that I felt no pain. He wept when he gave my father the bat. Sorry? What? You know that man you killed in the desert? Though a Saracen, was also my father's friend. He taught me to hunt with hawks when I was a boy. He taught me to shoot arrows from horseback. So what is that?
Can't, it's the peacocks. Yeah, the peacocks. It's their last shot.
Oh, I think it's someone else.
Cut it. Let's go again.
Seville was really hard work, actually, because you can't just go into a palace and do what you want. You can't. And there are rules and regulations. For example, you can't just go into the Alcazar and start drilling holes in the wall. You know, everything has to be protected because, of course, that building's been there for hundreds of years, and you have to respect that.
When we brought all our equipment in, we basically had to put down a proper bit of carpet or blankets so that none of the tiles, none of the flooring were scratched by the boxes that we'd have the weaponry in. Nothing could be scratched, touched.
You've got to kind of supervise these extras because they've been up since 4 that morning, you know, driven in by coach, been in costume, and then all of a sudden you'll find somebody in a set like that and they don't realise that up above them is a ceiling that's been there for sort of 2,000 years or whatever, and they're falling asleep with a big pole arm. You know, next minute they've scraped the ceiling. So you're constantly making people aware of where they are and what's around them.
We did have one slight problem, which was with the rain. The weather wasn't clement for the courtyards in the Alcazar.
Arthur had to cover over the floor, which was marble, was white marble. So it was a challenge for Arthur and the construction department and the art director to come up with an idea. So they used wood, which they painted to look like marble, which is often used in filming. We use it. But this torrential rain was creating a problem because the floor was warping and it was coming up. It was tricky because obviously it was raining one day and then there'd be like sun, so the wood was going. So they had to sort of try and repair it, and they had a few spare boards which they kept, you know, they put down, they replaced, but it was really difficult.
So there was a certain amount of schedule shuffling because a lot was scheduled to be shot interior/exterior in the courtyard, but with stair rods coming down for days on end and lakes forming, it wasn't easy to do.
Look at his face. You gotta get a look at this. Do it now, Ready? Pass off. Yeah, pass off. Pass off. Look at that. Look at that. What a face. Take your hand.
Whenever we arrived at set, there were like, you know, a lot of young screaming ladies and a lot of screaming fans and people, and it was amazing, but it was really intimidating.
I haven't experienced anything like that before, and that's largely because of Orlando and his reputation. It was very, very amusing, and probably not all that pleasant for him, I'm not sure.
Yeah, they were around all right. It was kind of funny, all that. Well, it was funny for me.
You'd be in the depths of this old monastery that we were staying in. You know, a monastery with like 3-foot thick walls and oak doors like that. And you could still hear the screaming, you know, Orlando.
¿Dónde está Orlando? You know, and they're just, yeah, it was really, and they're little kids, just like obsessed.
For the crew itself, it was a battle to get in on the set, and everybody's looking for autographs.
It was crazy. I mean, it was crazy. I don't know how he survived. And they were screaming at anybody who came out the door. I came out the door, and they go, "What?" Oh. And they would do it for the next, but what? Oh, it's not Orlando.
I stumble out through the door, and 2 little kids are chasing me down the street on one bicycle going, "Senor, senor," waving a piece of paper and a pencil, and I'm going, look, you know, like, yo soy nobody, you know?
There was one point where I actually looked a lot like Orlando from behind, because we had the same hair kind of thing going on. So they would go crazy until I turned around and they would go.
One day when Orlando maybe mistakenly waved to the 500 pubescent girls outside the Alcazar, the car pulled out, they chased the car, and suddenly the car was stuck in a traffic jam. It was quite extraordinary. They were crying, they were screaming, they were hugging each other. It was like an action replay of the Beatles.
He's like a single Beatle, looking for the rest of his Beatles.
These are 3 bags, this is illegal.
Oh, no, there it is. I've done this one. Right now we're just checking people in for the charter. They're going off to Morocco, sending them on their way.
Absolutely frozen.
I must admit, I had never been to Spain before, but I fell in love with it. It's just the topography, geography generally in the country was just mind-blowingly beautiful. And it was, I mean, I was sad to leave. I was only on the picture for 5 weeks, maybe. And then they all went off to Morocco to film the rest of the film, so I had to come home. I was very sad about that. It was just a joy to be on it.
very large portion of the film was shot in Morocco, and when I first saw it, it was a desert. There was nothing there. It was just a model on a table to look at, and this vision that a director and a production designer had. We shot in several places in Morocco. Ouarzazate was basically the main area, and vicinities around Ouarzazate, because there's the most amazing scenery in Morocco. I mean, the landscape is incredible. So we based ourselves in Ouarzazate and went around and about, but most of the siege scenes and everything took place on the set, which was down at the Atlas Studios in Ouarzazate.
Ouarzazate was, it's an extraordinary town in the middle of the desert. I mean, it's this weird place. You just come across it. I have no idea why anybody would think of founding Ouarzazate. It's like a lot of those American cities, you know, just in the middle of the desert. So what on earth did you build here for? There's a wonderful coastline over there. There's a great river over there. But you built here. So they built in this just, I mean, really, most people wouldn't choose to go there unless they were interested in the film business.
It's a nice stopover for a night or two. We were there for 3 months, so you really took on the atmosphere of the place and the psyche of the place to some extent. It's a very tranquil place. It's a very introspective place. And after Spain, it was very noticeable. You had all that life of Spain and a very different kind of life in Ouarzazate. It was very simple. And then, of course, you have the film industry present there, and a lot of things are being built because of that.
There was obviously concerns for everyone going into Morocco, which is an Arab country, with obviously the recent situation in our world of, you know, of fundamentalist terrorism, and we're making a film which could be seen from many as probably a film that's inflammatory about the Christians' invasion, in a sense, of the Holy Lands and their war against Saladin and the Muslims. Equally, the perspective of the film takes is obviously a film which is not about that. The film shows the goodness in both people and also the evil that's done in the sense of this period of time, the evil that's done under the auspices of religion.
We just had originally the general normal security situation, which they always supply security and bodyguards. Then some rather irresponsible press came out.
There was an early article that came out saying that we were telling, an outrageous version of the movie, but I think whoever wrote that didn't even have the script. And then another paper got the script and sent copies to a bunch of other people asking what they thought of the script. And, I think it was horrible. I think it was really wrong to take the measure of a movie from reading the screenplay, because the screenplay is only one of the working parts of a movie, and it's a template, and lots of decisions are made that aren't just the screenplay. And for example, Ridley worked with Ghassan on set, and he would say, well, what would you do? How would you move or act or pray? Or what do you think Saladin would have done here? And things happen on the set that aren't always in the script. And that was unfortunate.
It concerned the King of Morocco greatly, and he supplied a full-on set of bodyguards 24/7 for Ridley.
I actually had 4 bodyguards, and this was insisted upon by the king. So for that, I was very generous. I thanked him for that, but I didn't need it, I don't think. I never even thought about it. But the guys were very discreet. They would, hang about. And even when I played tennis on a Sunday, there were 4 bodyguards on the tennis court. It was like funny. They'll go.
So there was a concern of it because of the situation, the world we live in today. But during the filming, we never really had any concerns. And, and the people that we worked with from the Moroccans were helpful, kind, and, not in any way was there any tension between crews and people about that situation.
Morocco is the windiest place in the world. It was blowing a gale every day. It was over 65 miles an hour. I mean, people's baseball hats would just fly off. You just see them they wouldn't go down, they just go straight up.
Normally wind stops the beginning of May. I had wind right through June. I couldn't believe it.
I can't think of a day where the wind wasn't blowing when we were filming in Ouarzazate. Except for when we were inside the walls where I sort of didn't notice it. But even then, everyone was just wearing goggles and, you know, had the Muslim wraps around just trying to like keep the sand out. It was insane. It was insane.
Of course it looks good on film. It just looks, I mean, you know, for a director who likes his atmosphere, whether it's smoke or sand or snow or whatever it is that Ridley's got in front of his camera, he likes it.
Always use the dust, because if I didn't, I'd create the dust. I'd have to have wind machines. The wind machines are noisy. I didn't need wind machines. God, it was like unbelievable.
Some days we couldn't shoot because the wind was too much. Or if the horses went by, it would just become a dust storm, so you wouldn't actually have, you know, an image.
All right, cut it. Cut it. It's inhuman. The wind was also great because it lifted the flags, fluttering. That's what I mean by dynamics. It's great.
But it was brutal. I mean, it was brutal. I mean, it's horrible to shoot it. I mean, it drives you crazy. I mean, people don't live in the desert out of choice. I really learned that. It's none of that romantic, you know, Lawrence Arabia stuff. It's not. It's a hard, horrible place. And then with days and days of wind on top, it does drive you crazy.
And of course, in contrast to that, the beauty of the place was incredible. On a clear day, particularly, with the mountains just there, you always felt like you could reach out and touch them.
He'll walk in, turn, ask the question, you answer. Not finish. Get back into it.
Sir, please.
Okay, guys.
It's clear the set, guys. We're rehearsing. Guys, how are you guys? Lock it up so we don't get concentrate.
It was only the first day week. Maybe 100 more.
We have food for 10.
Silence, silence, cut. That's it. That's it. Simple.
Are you covering this?
That's it.
This is it. Nothing tighter in there.
I think I better. It's a nice thing for a granary, isn't it? Just talking about food and just in silence. It just gets
like
away.
20 seconds.
Yeah, good. We need a 20-second scene, that's it. I'm trying a few more 20-second scenes. What's happening, Adam? Jesus Christ, there's not explosion. What are we doing? Oh, I thought we were going with that position. I said leave it, but I'll go with anything right now. Let's do it. Fucking hell.
Lock it up now. Very quiet. Shoot it. Roll sound. Roll. Speedy. Charlie, 155 takes 4 meanwhile. There.
That was only the first day. I'm going to walk in again, Mark. Sorry. Bit deeper? Okay. To the black splodge, okay?
Just hold it down. Set. And action.
That was only the first day. There may be 100 more.
We have food for 10.
Excellent. Cut it, cut it, cut it. Very good.
It's not often these days that you get a chance to work in such huge and lavish sets. That was one of the things that encouraged me to do the movie. I thought this is going to be a spectacular movie in sort of the old-fashioned way, you know, the way they used to make movies.
The Jerusalem set was visible from the air as we flew in. It's supposed to be like the largest freestanding set in the history of the movies, with front, back, and sides. It's pretty impressive.
It was an awesome site. It was absolutely fantastic. It's the biggest set of 360 degrees that I've seen ever. I mean, we've worked on a few other castles before in different movies, but this one that took you, the 360 was fantastic, internal as well as external. So yeah, there was no discrepancy whatsoever with the castle itself, with Jerusalem. But like I say, the set itself was awesome, absolutely fantastic.
The scale of it is one thing, but there's also the attention to detail, and you look at the amount of craftsmanship that has to go into the actual building of these things, the kind of design factor that's within them, and the ambition, you know, to go and do it properly. You just realise how lucky you are for a start.
From the first glance, when I saw Jerusalem, the precision and the great craftsmanship with which it was built, I felt like I was standing in front of the real stone blocks. They look 100% real, as if you're looking at the real-life buildings as it was 1,000 years ago.
The set in Morocco was divided into 4 courtyards, and each courtyard had a different purpose. One of the courtyards we had sort of Bedouin tents and camels and that type of thing, and then that was moved later on when we had the siege. There was a courtyard that had a very large well in it, which had lots of very beautiful shops to begin with before the siege started, and then the courtyard at the end we called the oil courtyard, and that had all the oil storage and that type of thing in it.
When I first saw Jerusalem, it was still under construction. And you arrive and you start to discuss where things are going to go, and we go on little battle meetings around it. And spending sort of 4 to 5 weeks before the main unit arrived, you saw Jerusalem take shape. You start to see the brickwork from looking absolutely mint, you start to see it aging down. You see kind of little bits of green mould being put in, and plaster and things, and it does take shape. And that last sort of 2 weeks before the main unit arrives, bosh, the dressing goes in, things start to happen, the well gets water in it, special effects are in there getting pumps going, getting little things going, the horses are brought in, animals are starting to be corralled around the set, and it just, you know, it was one of the sets where you couldn't see anything from the modern day apart till the cameras came in. You could stand in the middle of that and you would have been there.
Eventually it became home, so we arrived there every morning, and really likes actors on set pretty much throughout the scene you're doing. You don't get to go back to your trailer a lot, so you just find a nice spot to hang out and sit down. But in this case I was sitting down in 13th century Jerusalem, and there was like herds of goats and hundreds of kids making little bows and arrows. And of course when the shot stopped, the kids didn't stop, so they continued making their little bows and arrows. And then they started throwing them at each other, and then the kind of women who were looking after them went crazy at them, and then they had to get them all back under control for the next shot. And it was like being in a medieval village. I mean, it was really wild. And so we hung out there during the day. And when we stepped out of the castle, we stepped into sandstorm hell again. So we loved being in that castle. Of course, the Saracen army eventually gets there. So we didn't spend much time there. We spent all our time in the desert waiting to get in.
To give you a good start on this, what I'd do is I'd have a line of sand, and I'd have these towers out of shot. I'd have on cue, I'd have 60 archers come into line, pop and fire as the towers move in alongside them. Then the towers move, then the guys with shields come around, they stay still, they knock, they move around the guys with the shields, and then they fire again. We have 50 down archers.
Yeah, so...
Oh, they're all lined up, let's watch it, yeah? There's only, I'll see, but there's not a lot. There's not very impressive, but we'll watch. Getting shot in the bollocks here.
One of the kind of hardest things was the archery, and the archery we always have problems with. You'll go out there and you'll train people for 3 months, and you will have them come in groups of 20 people to practice archery, and you'll get them. They're excellent. They're really brilliant, and they're hitting the targets. They're doing the correct draw. They're doing it all together in unison, and you'll leave it for about 10 days, and you'll get them onto the set, and it's a mess.
Whoa, 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 stop. Stop, 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 stop. Stop, 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 stop. Stay there. Have the arrows go back. Arrows go back. Arrows, no, shields stay here. Shields stay here. Shields stay here. But they must, they've got to be in a line. Got to be in a line. Got to be in a line. Okay, like this, like that. You got to be in a line, okay? Push him back a bit. Shields in a line, yeah.
They've forgotten everything you've taught them. And Ridley's quite rightly is saying, what are these people doing? Why haven't they not been taught? And we're trying to say, well, they have been.
That's where they move to. Now, ready with the arrows. When they fire, they're going to reload as these guys come through and do this. Yes, do it. Fuck me. Arrows come forward. Come forward. In a line, guys.
I've been standing up for an hour now.
Ready, that's cool. Now, do it again. Do it again.
So we're there on the day, kind of running around, trying to remind these people of what they've been taught, you know, and finally it clicks again. But that was a nightmare day, that one, wasn't it?
Guys, rehearse those archers, and I think the archers and the shield men, I wonder if it'll ever be right. You better be rehearsing them on the side right now.
We had a fantastic stunt coordinator who's worked with Ridley, you know, on every film since G.I. Jane, and he's great. He's got a great relationship. But, you know, we did some big stunts there, you know, people on fire at 45 feet in the air, coming out, and that process is a stressful process, you know, for me, because I'm trying to get it shot safely, but not also hold back and say, whenever you're ready, guys, also be saying, well, are you ready? What do you need to do now, you know? And there's that level where you're pushing things forward because you need to push, you need to get things going, but equally you've got to respect safety.
Yes, I've been cutting boxes for many years now. Fully trained in the art of cutting box corners off. What does it take to be really good at it? About 5 minutes, but my father was really good at it. He had no thumbs, you know, very quick though.
Especially when you're doing fire gags, where you're sort of, everything becomes about timing. And you're always trying to say, well, how long before the camera's ready? Shall I do it now so I'm not waiting too long for them to come back? But equally, I don't want to get them back and them not be ready, because then they'll be hot and the gel will go off and all these things go on. So that was a constant sort of battle, and when you're setting people on fire, at 45 feet in the air and they're jumping off and falling onto boxes, it's not easy, and it's naturally tense when you're doing that stuff, especially when you're doing it under a time restriction like all filming is. So we sort of battled our way through that and got through it. That's an element of filming I think all the time now, is as an AD, is you're trying to push things forward. And it's hard work sometimes, because you say, fuck me, why can't someone else push someone forward for a while? Why do I have to keep asking, are you ready, are you ready, are you ready, are you ready, are you ready? When are you going to be ready? We're doing that next, we're doing that next. And you go, fuck me, why can't someone else just tell me I'm ready? And why do I keep asking? But that's the nature of the job, I guess, and that's what we do.
Okay, so. Okay, copy, and then we go to number 1. Right.
Right, stand by to shoot, everyone. Be ready on your toes. Stand by. Be on your toes, ready. Bring up the black smoke. Bring up the black smoke. Bring up the smoke. Bring up the smoke. Team, stand by. How's that looking? Wrong sound, guys. Wrong sound. Rolling. Back up. Action! Action!
I was awakened in the middle of the night by a hysterical production manager who was telling me that the set had just burned down and that I should come immediately. And my answer was, well, has it been put out? And they said yes. And I said, well, I'll see you in the morning.
When you first hear that information and you just have no idea, and of course you don't know what chemicals, there were gas lines buried all underneath the sand. So it was quite serious. It was really serious at the time, but it was also quite dramatic.
So at dawn, I arrived to see one of the siege towers, a charred, blackened skeleton of itself, completely charred through and blackened. It was fantastic. And a bit of the set, it was a bit like a Swiss cheese. It had a few holes in it, but in general, it was, for me, an improvement.
What had happened was a charge, one of the charges, there were lots of fire bombs being thrown, and it accidentally carried on burning. It wasn't put out properly, and it burnt the siege tower.
We didn't know it was smouldering. The firemen hadn't put it out. So, boom, the whole thing went up and started to burn the wall, because that wall isn't stone, it's fiberglass molding. So once it goes, we could have lost a lot.
And this is a credit to Rid, right? We come in the next day and we're all like, and he walks on set and he sees, he goes, fantastic, it looks amazing. Well, that'll be in the back of the next shot. You know, and it was like, that was his whole attitude. There was nothing that got in the way of his mood, of his temperament, of what we were doing, of nothing. And that attitude and that mentality was really what drove everybody through, and you know, it inspired everyone to work so hard. I really believe that.
So whereas there were a lot of guilty expressions from certain quarters on the set, particularly the fire department, I was quite happy to see what I saw. It didn't take but a couple of days to repair the damage, and they managed to shoot around it while we did that work. And I think it added a whole different dimension to the set, really transformed it into a place where you genuinely believe there was a war on. And, you know, it was a happy accident in the end.
Okay, stand by to shoot. Stand by, everyone. Get in your position. Stand by to shoot. Stand by. Clear the straight line. Clear. Stand by to shoot. Stand by. Clear now, guys. Mark, where's that stuff going? Just don't get clear, guys. Here we go.
We did have a bit of a drama with one of the catapults in that it actually snapped. The arm of it snapped. Luckily, nobody got hurt, but it did, unfortunately, cause a problem.
Okay, everyone's okay, right. Clear everyone away from it. Clear everyone away from it, guys. Don't go and look at it. Clear away. Just clear everyone away from it, guys. Away from it.
Guys, clear back now. Clear back.
The reason that it happened is because the temperature in Morocco is so extreme. You can go from being quite cold at night to really hot in the day. And of course, wood doesn't like that because it's shrinking and expanding and shrinking and expanding. And so eventually it just dries out and it becomes like a matchstick. And that's what happened to the arm on this particular piece of machinery. But they got round that and they got on and carried on. And they managed to complete the film without any other mishaps.
It's an interesting one having your head lopped off. You know, I've had a few kind of early demises recently. You never quite get used to it. But yeah, the actual shoot itself, it does get slightly ridiculous where you have people tossing the head into frame and out of frame, and it's kind of not hitting its mark or turning up in the right way, or the left ear is not the way it should be.
It was a very complicated shot. This one shot would go through all of us and then find Renal. The flags would be going in the right direction, the smoke would be going in the right direction, and then Renal would get on the floor and there'd be this almighty whoosh from Saladin.
No good on the head.
How's that on the head, Ridley?
No good.
No good?
Deeper.
Reset the head.
Grab the head. Grab the head again. Down here.
Stand by. Change the sword. Here we go. Action.
No, no head.
Guys, reset. Reset Brendan quickly. Action. One more time. Still rolling, guys. One more try. Action. 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 That's it. Action.
A king does not kill a king. Why not? No.
I don't know what it looked like on the day, but it was quite hard getting that to happen. I'm sure it'll look fine, but it won't be, it's not a nice death, it's a nasty one for that guy.
And I started working for Ridley, you know, I was the second assistant, second, making the coffee, keeping people quiet and you know, running about, making sure everyone had their lunch and, you know, stopping traffic and doing those kind of jobs. And I guess, you know, ever since I worked with Terry Needham and Ridley, you know, my ambition was to be a first AD. And there won't get many bigger films than this I'll ever work on. There won't be. I mean, this is one of the biggest films I could do. So in a sense, I've reached the highlight of maybe my career at this age. And, you know, and it's amazing, you know, to work on a film of this scale, of this size, this epic, that you're really proud of as well. Not some nonsense piece of, you know, fluff, something that's got some bollocks and heart and story and history. And I guess that's what would be my amazing experience of this movie. It's a movie that, you know, I will tell my children, like my dad told me about movies I worked on, and I'll be very proud of it.
I was just so lucky to experience it and just to be along for the ride, you know what I mean? And try and, you know, add whatever ever I could to, you know, to the project. And hopefully it'll be, hopefully it'll all come out in the wash and it'll all look like it's working in the right direction. It's a little intimidating, to tell you the truth.
The experience of working on Kingdom of Heaven, I feel that it might not be repeated in my lifetime. It was an amazing experience, and we all pulled out the stops, and I think we all really went for it. I might be sitting in this chair in 2 or 3 years' time or longer, having done another film, and say the same thing, but I don't think so, because I really believe that it's going to leave its mark.
In the end, everyone was really proud that we brought it in, you know, very close to on budget. It was shot really responsibly. Everything went really smoothly, but it wasn't the end of work. It was just on to the next. So it was exciting and people were happy, but it wasn't the end of the movie.
Every phase of making a movie has its own problems. The hardest of all probably is getting the screenplay written. That's, without question, the hardest. The second most hardest, I think, is editing. So, oddly enough, it's both problems lie in here. The post is very difficult because it's like telling a joke. If you've got a good joke, you tell it twice, still funny. Tell it 3 times, tell it 4 times, no longer funny. Tell it 5 times, you don't want to hear it again. When you're editing, same thing, you're looking at scenes that you loved and now are beginning to feel too long. You're really almost like working outside of yourself. You're constantly standing back to appraise what you've got.
I was with the production from the beginning, so the first few days we didn't have dailies yet, so I went to the set. That was pretty exciting. Then in dailies, Ridley is very verbal. He sits there and talks stream of consciousness, seemingly to the room, or he'll address me or the DP, John Matheson, directly with his comments, or just stream of consciousness to the room in appreciation of various aspects of whatever we're seeing on the film.
Less landscape now, you mustn't see down below, you see. But the idea would be you start with all the prayers that would carry over this. He'd finish washing, go to the balcony, and then see Al-Marik, and then she'd speak. She's brought in breakfast. What's nice is she can't see Al-Marik.
One heart, one morality.
It is amazing how Ridley works in dailies because he's so communicative and he's so excited, and you can tell by his excitement too what he likes and what he's going for, and that's really, really refreshing. We're going about 400 feet.
That's nice.
Actually, that's nice.
That's nice. That's useful. You know, maybe in the dunes up at Essaouira, we'll have a transition there, then Jerusalem. So maybe we need to change the landscape. You know what I'm saying? I think this is like wearing thin now, because it becomes all about the light.
He's the best audience for the dailies because even after a long 12, 14-hour location shoot, he sits down in the chair like the best moviegoer in the world and just enjoys the footage and relishes every aspect of it.
Well, I think he just truly enjoys watching all the dailies. You know, it's like I mean, he'll watch everything. I mean, he shoots a lot of footage. I think we have probably close to 1 million feet of film, maybe over 1 million feet of film. And I don't know, I'd assume they may watch 70%, 80% of it, a lot of stuff.
I take tons and tons of notes. I take my own notes, my own impressions, and then I take pertinent notes of his impressions. And that it could include liking a certain take for light, smoke, speed, performance, angle, any aspect of it that he refers to.
We're lucky because we got 40-mile-an-hour wind, so that was great. Helped tremendously. Kept the day clear, and so we got a lot of very nice high stuff.
I like to think of myself as the first-time viewer of the film. I only get to see it for the first time once, and I'm really excited by that process, and I usually go as quickly as possible and cut what I've seen. After the completion of principal photography, we went back to LA for the director's cut period.
This is a proposed schedule,
Right.
and I think that this is a realistic one.
Is this the
39-week post schedule
Alright,
as opposed to the 29-week, which...
The broad stroke is, if you rush to deliver it, for what? Because you ain't going to put it out till when? And by the time you finish with monumental overtime and blah, 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 you probably either ended up breaking even. Like, the only difference is you're exhausted, as opposed to doing it properly with a designed exit. Yeah? Right, and we totally understand that that's the best way to handle everything, the effects, the sound, the music, and the previews which take. Because I mean, I can't see as we haven't got a predetermined release date other than a vague notion of sometime in '05 before Easter, right? Sometime.
I heard it was May 5th, exactly.
May 5th.
I mean, unless that's changed, does anybody know if that's
end
changed?
of April.
Yeah.
Not having a release date is always a very, as I'm sure you guys, it's always a dangerous thing.
Right.
If you have a deadline, a set deadline, the movie has to come out, you come up with a plan and everyone sticks to it. It's the simplest, it's actually simpler. It might be harder work, but it's, you know.
While we were in Los Angeles, we were just focused, for the most part, on the editing, i.e. the shape of the film. And then when we got to London, the visual effects work really amped up. We were right down the street from MPC, and we had, for a long stretch of time, we had early morning screenings or meetings almost every day.
It'd be nice to define the base of the city with a definitive wall. So you see a wall.
Yeah.
And I'm saying a wall like, there's one right there. There. That's great. It's right there. Can you freeze it?
Yeah.
Just freeze it when you get to the end. Just freeze there. Yeah. Wow, look at that. I see, this is great. Wall, wall, wall. And I see you are running it round.
Yeah.
Wall. What's wonderful is this starting place. Great stuff, isn't it? This stuff.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. This is a plate that we happen to have, which we shot from the top of Golgotha. And we liked it so much because of the light and the mountain range that it seemed to have a beautiful natural topography to take the city of Jerusalem and just a nice high wide shot, so that's what they're working on now. So this here is the original hillside. Here is Golgotha in Ouarzazate.
These are very basic walkouts, but we just wanted to establish the distance into Shiraz and Moab for both of them.
Great.
What would you want on the billboard?
Also.
The way that Ridley was approaching this film and what we were in great sync with and supporting that was he wanted it to have a gritty realism. He wanted to make it as if this is a war picture that was shot at the time, a documentary almost. And one of the things we tried to stay away from was swinging the camera around on a rope. We wanted to not make something that would feel like a following Spider-Man through New York City. We wanted to feel as if these were cameras, as it were, of that time, of the 12th century, if there was such a thing.
The danger about visual effects is that because you can put the camera in an impossible position, right there is a question. Because when you get an impossible angle, to me, I'm slightly taken out of the movie. I'm going for a second, I'm taken out of the movie and aware I'm watching a movie. With this, I've tried to keep this really real, and therefore be very careful where you put the camera. If this camera is flying in, from whose helicopter is that, you know? You've got to be kind of careful about that.
Obviously, we have a few tricks that we throw in. We have helicopter shots. We've got some amazing reveals that we do. But we kept that to a minimum, and we only tried to do it where it supported the narrative. And I think that's really where you find that truth. Instead of just doing it for the visceral fun of, ooh, a cool shot, you're trying to do it when you're trying to tell something. You're trying to show something that is explanatory, but also making it feel in that balance between the beauty and the realism that we tried to achieve, and I think we did in the most part.
Thanks, guys.
And then we would go back down the street to the editing room and continue our other work.
Well, we went back simpler. I think the landing, taking off from Essaouira is better the way we had it.
Yeah, to stay with them on the deck.
And you were picking up on two people who say, did they get on the ship or not? I'm saying, yes, they got on the fucking ship.
Yeah.
So I've now even got David Thewlis saying, the journey is perilous, sometimes perilous.
Good.
Ridley, being the pragmatist that he is, agreed to drop the shipwreck scene in the development stage because it was budgeted at around $3 million to shoot the shipwreck scene. So he had come up with a cinematic/editorial transition from the over-the-shoulder to the foreboding sky, dissolving to the dead from the ship on the shore. And we felt during the editing process that narratively it just didn't have enough weight to it. It didn't have enough heft, and people felt like, what happened? And so we had to create something, and it went through quite a few different permutations.
In terms of the shipwreck, I mean, I've done a little bit of trying to put more Balian in the shipwreck sequence.
That's what we're missing.
Yeah, that's to me, that would be, I think, the only thing that my little edit has to offer, is that maybe ideas of how to get Balian in there.
Let's see it.
I mean, it's very rough, but
Okay.
just some concepts.
Okay.
Let's get it out there.
Go balls. Right, I think it seems good. You know, I was thinking one more thing. You know when the sergeant finally looks at Balian and does that little cynical snort?
Yes.
He cut to Balian. Could Balian be at sea suddenly?
Okay.
Does that make sense? Going from him to Balian, except now Balian is at sea.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
If you want to get really fancy, it could turn into the sea.
I think Doty's right. If you could do a pan off his head onto the sea, that would really do it. You'd have a kind of, if you like, poetic transition.
With the help of visual effects, we were able to take shots of Balian and some other soldiers and treat them and shake them and add water and make them look underwater, and with sound and cuts to black, we ultimately ended up with a scene that we felt represented a shipwreck.
Just run it through again slowly. I think the inserts of the soldiers are a bit quick.
Okay.
I think the idea of going below decks is a really good one. Going to the hatch, slamming, silence and darkness, ships going over, playing it all with sound. That's the poetic thing. The sound will make it into, let's say, a more, if you like, poetic transition, right?
Everything you see in that sequence, we created in visual effects. We found some shots of Balian, some shots of people cowering in the Battle of Jerusalem, and for instance, with Balian, we took his costume off. He was dressed up as a knight of Jerusalem. We put a tunic on him, as if he was just coming from the Messina, where he was wearing a tunic. We put a cross on his neck, the cross that he'd from his wife. That we see in the beginning of the film. We put that on him. And we put dripping water dripping all around him, and we put wood planks behind him, just with water pouring down them. So suddenly their people are now inside the hull of a ship that was not there before. And then the shots of the ships at sea, the oceans are real photography, but then we added the boats and the lightning and the clouds and different camera moves to create a dynamic environment for this shipwreck that happens.
The other way that it would have been done traditionally is that they would have built a 3D model, and instead they did 3D CGI. But it was a lot of smudging and pushing and shoving and tugging and pulling on the various shots. We really had to work it, and it took place over several weeks before we finally came up with a solution that worked.
Good. I think the going to black, funny enough, a beat longer. I'm just thinking of the going to black door, big slam, then allowing for a moment for that music and sound to start working, then the gradual shift through to something else, which is the underwater stuff, you know what I mean? Felt maybe a shade tight.
Also during that time, the sound work was going on, which was right down the hall, and the music work.
Okay.
So when we get to it, I'll show you what we're doing in the film, but we're playing completely counterpart to what's going on. There's all sorts of mass murder going on, carnage, brutality, and and we're going to play the sadness of it all. Here we go. Here's bar 4, 2, 3, 5, and. Well, we're at Abbey Road, and I've been conducting a huge orchestra downstairs in Studio One, and Ridley's there, which is great, although he's very busy still editing his film. It's brilliant when he comes, as you saw. You know, quite often one's left to it at the stage, and he'll be off in his cutting room. But it's really good when he's here because there are just moments and beats that, oh, Harry, could we make this a little bit rounder or this a bit sharper? He may not talk in musical terminology, but it's great to know that now we can make some changes on the stage. Otherwise, you know, when these things happen in a dub, the music editor's got to do it with a pair of scissors. My expectations were having, you know, knowing his body of work, I knew that he would have a clear idea about what he was expecting from the music, but also that he'd be quite liberal about me bringing whatever I felt I could to the party. Because sometimes you got to understand. Sometimes in this funny old job that I'm fortunate to do, quite often one's very restricted by the time you join a film. I mean, perhaps pre-production and production and then post-production one hasn't been involved with. Shooting and casting, all this stuff, and by then perhaps sometimes a director can have such a firm view of what he wants you to do that it's one's not got very much room to manoeuvre in. But it's not really the case with Ridley. You know, there's a really good palette there for me to work with, and he's worked with some really fabulous composers, so he knows how to whip it into shape.
Good, Red. That's going to be not too shabby.
Yeah.
That's going to be more exciting, I think.
Can we be left with a umbilical right through the next scene where he's talking about the machines, the engines, protect the engines, blah, 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 until he comes through and says, quiet, everybody quiet. Yeah? So we're going to have some connection there.
Absolutely, this will all carry on.
Great.
It's not going to be a huge orchestral sound, but slightly more military, I think.
Yeah, good.
I've done 30 or 40 scores here at Abbey Road with these musicians, and it's really nice to know the back desk of the viola's names and know that she had a baby last year or whatever. And I can't imagine a situation where one will walk into a room with these amazing musicians and each of them are, you know, may play with the LSO or the RPO or whatever. They're really good musicians. And there's a load of them. They can walk in there, they've all got the music, they've never seen it before, but it's well marked and hopefully decently written, and it tells them when they have to play quietly, play loudly, whatever. So we could go, okay, after 4, 3, 4, go. But why not play them the scene with my demo, and they hear it in the headphones with the dialogue up there, and they can understand what I'm trying to do with the music.
So we'll listen to the demo. Okay, so this is this is the first time I've made it has to go in the back. It's a really cool song.
By the time we've finished with the sessions, they won't have seen the film from beginning to end, but they'll have a really good idea about the characters in the film because constantly I'm talking to them about that. And I just keep them included in what's going on. Otherwise, so you've got to imagine they're probably with Gabriel Yared next week and with Zimmer the week after, with Horner the week after. In fact, Star Wars is here, I think, next month. And, you know, they do a bunch of sessions. You know, it's easy for them to open the paper when they're not playing and lose touch with what they're doing. So one tries to jump around the place and try and make it a bit special. I enjoy that. Yeah, I really enjoy that. Okay, let's try with the track. See if we've got enough oomph. Let's just play it with Ridley out in the room, see if we can make his knees tremble. Here it comes, bar 5.
While we were in London, we continued the editing process and we came back to LA, I think 5 times to show the film. And some of those were screenings just for the studio and some of them were public screenings.
when the studio saw the movie, everyone's excited. I mean, there it is. But immediately you start talking about what needs to happen.
The first thing that came up, which is no surprise to anybody, because this is usually the first note that comes out of any studio executive's mouth, is that it's too long.
We talked about length a lot in post-production. And it was a balancing act between what Ridley would call the bum ache factor and what the movie wanted to be, because the script got long during the shoot, and so a lot of things were shot, and he would want to shoot it and figure it out later. Well, now's the later.
We had already been working hard on getting it to a pretty decent length. It was 3:05, 3 hours and 5 minutes. That's off of an assembly that was probably 4.5 or so hours, maybe 5. So, but the siege itself in that assembly was probably 45 minutes long. Now the siege is like 18 minutes. And then there was a lot of discussion about the beheadings. And then there was a certain amount of discussion about the boy, the subplot of the boy.
We weren't sure what was right for the movie, because in a way, Sibylla's story informs everything that was going on in Jerusalem. But on the other hand, it doesn't necessarily inform Balian's story about what he's doing in Jerusalem. I thought that once it was shot, that was it, but the conversations kept going after that.
The first draft that I read of the script had the boy in it, and it never occurred to me that it was something that could be taken out, because it did seem so integral to the story and kind of gave the whole thing like more substance, something more that you could sink your teeth into. So it never occurred to me that that was going to be something that came into question. I'm trying to remember when I was given this other draft and said, read these 2 drafts and, tell me what you think, kind of thing. And I read the 2 drafts, and I like it better with the boy. And that was from reading it on a page. And so I felt, well, it's clearly so much better. Why would this even come up? Well, it's too long, is the one word. But I think if you were talking to any of the people who said it's too long and then also wanted the boy out, I think it's very simple to say. A clearer, straighter through line is the kind of narrative and storytelling that is easier for some people to stick their teeth into. That complexities, the nature of which Ridley is famous for, is a little bit harder for people to dig their teeth into. And he's asking more of his audience. So, without belaboring it, it's more sophisticated. And that kind of sophistication can be scary. And I understand it because it's hard to market complex and sophisticated product. It's easier to market straight ahead narrative through line.
One of the first things that you start working on is the trailer, the first trailer that's going to show in theaters. And we started working on that early, although I think the trailer got out a little bit late.
On the black screen, you can hear the faint rumble of thunder, and then a little bit of artillery, and then a little bit of spurs, and then a little bit of chain mail and creaking leather. Then you start to hear horses breathing, right? And as this is happening, up on the screen comes, and this is to this beautiful carol, sounds like a carol. A great voice saying, "I have seen the lunacy of fanatics under every denomination be called the will of God. I have seen too much religion in the eyes of too many murderers. Holiness is in right action and courage on behalf of those who cannot defend themselves." ... Silence. Then underneath it says, "Hospitaller, 1185 AD, you crash through to this blinding shot of Renaud, the one with the red hennaed hair, who's got his sword like this going, wah, wah. And then you go to Crusades or Kingdom of Heaven, May the 5th, right? So, right? Because I think this text is beautiful, and it's actually dialogue from the movie.
Without having Ridley ask me to do it, I went through and I made a cut without the boy really early on, and I just I don't like this. and I just like kind of pushed it aside, because he shot it in such a way as that I had all of the literal connective tissue to do it without the boy. So I was able to do it, and I saw how it all kind of fit together. So I knew that it would work. By work, I just mean that you could connect the dots. Because sometimes there are scenes that are so embedded in a narrative that you cannot take a scene out. You are left with a giant hole. And what the kind of holes that we were left with were not narrative holes, they were character holes. So to take the scenes out, you could still tell the story, but you're left with less emotion. And I think that an emotional connection gives value to a movie-going experience.
My brother's dying. My son will be king and I his regent. I must rule for him.
There was a push, a very hard push to take the boy out, which fed into the push to make the film shorter. And the two issues, I think, actually became clouded. And there was a point when Ridley was being the team player that he is and respecting that you don't bite the hand that feeds you. It is a blending of art and commerce. You're not a poet in a room with a piece of paper and a pencil. You're an artist who has to be a pragmatist because this is millions upon millions of dollars and you're protecting somebody's investment.
I'm pretty user-friendly with the studios. Consequently, I diffuse the time bomb because how much money they put into it, I respect that. Because if I was a studio putting that kind of money into it, I'd want to have a say as well, definitely. So I see their point of view, so it becomes a discussion. I listen to them, they listen to me, I go away, I look at it thinking, maybe they have a point, so you narrow it down.
So really what started to happen was poor Dodie was cutting two movies at the same time, the boy version and the no boy version. And refining two movies at the same time because we're trying to figure out which one was right.
The versions were getting closer and closer and closer in length, which to me is also kind of interesting because what we were doing in order to try to keep the boy in, which was tied to the length issue, we were kind of stripping things out of the film at large, which was diminishing the sophistication. And what it did was it sort of took the narrative focus off of this grand tapestry and put a spotlight on the Balian character, which, although it's a very interesting arc, it wasn't the way Ridley had envisioned the story. He'd envisioned the story with a much broader and a more complex feel. So you can still connect the dots, but the engagement, the click-in, the when does it click into place for you, some of those things were getting diminished.
A new world. A better world than has ever been seen.
I like the use of the voice.
There, you are not what you were born, but what you have it in yourself to be. A kingdom of conscience. Peace instead of war. Love instead of hate. That is what lies at the end of Crusade.
I go to pray. For what? For the strength to endure what is to come.
It's not there yet, is it? I got more of an impression of Liam Neeson than Lando.
Yeah. Well, because they used his voice all the way.
But he was there a lot, and I think I did get no sense of Saladin, and I get no sense of Saladin and the big overstory, the big story. Shouldn't be forgotten that it is probably a love story. Shouldn't be forgotten that you have a leper king. Shouldn't be forgotten the biggest thing of all, which is the Christians against the Muslims, which I know they're being very careful about that, but that's what the story is.
Okay. The other thing that Ridley was working on and the studio had notes on and he was trying to figure out the answer was the ending, because several endings were shot, and how the relationship was going to be resolved between Sibylla and Balian. One version, Balian rode his horse past all the pilgrims leaving the city, and he never saw Sibylla. And he went off, and he ended up in France, and their relationship didn't go anywhere past that last scene where he tells her that she needs to decide what she wants to do. And then there was a version where he rides and he gets off and he has a few words and holds her hand, and they walk, and we see the pilgrims walking into the distance, and there is no France. There was a version where once you get to France, she's not there, and a version where she is there. There's a version in France where he's looking at the tree and thinking about new life and rebirth and maybe even his wife. And there's a version without the tree. So there were a lot of things that were shot and a lot of things that were tried. And I think Ridley finally found the right one.
Hi guys. Good morning. This film we wanted to finish photochemically just for speed, really, and we were very happy with what Technicolor had achieved in the everyday dailies. We didn't think we had to change anything or colour anything or do any special post-production sort of grading you can do in a place like this that we got from the laboratory. You know, the colours that we got in northern Spain were the colours we actually got from the laboratory, as were the colours and the hues from Jerusalem. So we were happy with that, but what happened was there was a lot of cutting going on to the last minute. So we had no choice but to make a DI, or digital intermediate.
Digital intermediate is a process that involves taking the original negative, scanning it, conforming it into the shape of the finished film. By that I mean re-performing the edits that have been already determined by the editor in the Avid, and then color correcting in a digital realm, and then outputting that to a new negative.
I think there's a danger of getting so moody that sometimes you lose brightness, and the word is glow. When you got a little bit more light in there, not in the blacks, in the lights, you lose the glow of the image. Now go to the next forest, and I think watch the gloomy veily bit. You're getting a bit veily. I thought I'd got fucking glaucoma or something for a second. This is very nice, beautiful colour throughout. I'm looking at this just saying, just give me a teeny bit of glow. Air is the best description, air.
Because the editing went on so long and there were so many things that were up for grabs, I felt finally liberated by not having to cut the negative, because then I knew that wherever the chips fell, we would not be compromising the original negative and or what could be done at a future date for another version. So we didn't cut the negative at all. We scanned individual pieces and conformed those scans in a digital environment. And even after we did that, we continued to make changes.
This was the first time that Ridley had done a digital intermediate, as well, myself as well, and Dodie. And originally we thought, well, let's just have the siege be DI. And it eventually evolved to the whole movie being DI. And to be perfectly honest, we would have never been able to cut the negative on this movie because it kept changing. So the DI actually continued to allow us to make more changes and to not have to lock until a little later.
This room probably is better than it's ever looked. You really crushed it, but I think it benefits by that. I like the greenish yellow light. Firelight. Yeah, rather than the rosy firelight, the slightly unfriendly firelight, right?
We were mixing the last reel, and we had added some lines after the first night of the siege where Balian is talking to Almeric in the storeroom about that was only the first night.
That was only the first day. There may be 100 more.
Saladin will show no mercy.
We must hold out. Force him to offer terms.
What terms?
Everyone lives. We fight for the people. Their safety and freedom.
I'm looking at Ridley and I'm going, everybody doesn't live. We can't have Balian saying everyone lives. We have to take that out. And we both agreed, and I went and I took it out. But it was in the 11th hour. The DI allows you to go and make a change, and the world doesn't come crashing in. And so that's a really liberating thing. And one could argue that you're delaying the decision-making process, or it's displaying a weakness of not making decisions. But again, if it's the world that we live in and it's a tool to be used, I say use it.
In a way, I think it's important to kind of force a director to make final decisions, and I think sometimes the best decisions and the best movies are made with incredible pressure to commit to what it is. But at the same time, I mean, look at the way visual effects are. You know, when you're shooting something, you're not committing to that image in the camera, are you? You're going back and you're painting it, the sky and the landscape and the clouds and the buildings. So everything about movie making seems to be more fluid. Even editing is, you know, you're not putting tape on a piece of celluloid. You know, a cut is so much more definitive when you're doing it that way. Now it's type it and do it 9,000 ways. And the director also, up until the last second, can be changing the cut and changing things. So I guess part of the natural process is that the movie continues to change even after it's released in theaters. So while he was cutting the theatrical version, he always knew that he was going to have a different version, a longer version that he was going to be able to put on the DVD. It was never a kind of a question of there's just only going to be one cut. And I think maybe that's part of what new filmmaking is, which is, well, I can do this one and I can do that one. So he always had an idea that he would have a much longer version of the film on the DVD because there's freedom there to be able to try new things.
I was disappointed. I must confess that some of the things that I loved the most were not in the theatrical release, but I knew that if we were going to do a version of the film without the boy, it wasn't going to be without a lot of kicking and screaming, and that came in the form of months of 7 days a week work, including flying back and forth to London and LA for various screenings, participating pragmatically in the screening/testing process while trying to maintain as much of the integrity of Ridley's original vision as possible, and always knew that if it did not fulfill Ridley's original vision, that he was going to go balls to the wall for the DVD director's cut.
I have to pay attention to what's happening now. I have to pay attention to the films that are being successful now, which I may not like very much, but I have to analyze why is this film being successful, and then I guess in a way try and do my version. If you've got it, don't be afraid of being intelligent. Right? You can't allow for the lowest common denominator. If they don't get it, too bad. Because sometimes the danger is that marketing generally do believe if you come across as being too intelligent, people won't go.
I think this was a film that was maybe, I venture to say maybe more important for Ridley to do than any of the others. Then on the other hand, he probably feels like whatever he's working on now is the most important. I think we all work that way. But I have a feeling that this was something that I was very excited about, and very excited about telling this story and giving that to the audience as a perspective on the world, in a sense, or whatever you want to take it as.
I think with this story, he cared enormously about what it was saying. I think it comes at a time when we have a Christian-Muslim conflict going on. And I think he wanted to make a comment on that through a story of an ancient Christian-Muslim conflict. And I think he wanted to do it not in a gung-ho Western way, but actually just to show that right could be on both sides, and wrong could be on both sides.
I don't think it's playing to any particular message, but, you know, because I think it's in the hands of someone like Ridley, he's not juiced it for any other reason than what it really was. It's kind of fair. No one comes out that well, but no one comes out that badly.
I mean, interestingly, I think there's been a lot of talk about the political aspect of this time frame and with the current affairs, and it was very interesting to me because it's as if this has been going on forever. War over land, power, money, religion. It's been going on for hundreds of years, and we're still doing it, and nobody's really learning the lessons that history can teach us. And I think the way that Ridley depicts war and the way that Ridley draws an audience into a world, it's so real that hopefully the idea that the horror of war, that aspect of it, it can inform in some way to the people watching the movie.
نحن نتمنى فعلا أن هذا الفيلم.
We truly hope that this would be the beginning of a series of films that would influence public opinion in the sense of peaceful coexistence between people and civilizations.
التعايش بين الشعوب وبين الحضارات. كما قلنا صلاح الدين كان
Salah ad-Din was an advocate for dialogue rather than a man of war. And I hope that this film would be the start of building a mutual understanding of how this universe can be inhabited by all.
I hope that, the camps around the world that may be worried about the sensitivity and the timing of this film will breathe a sigh of relief that we have told this story in very, very capable hands, and we've approached it with an honesty and a dignity and a respect, primarily, especially for the Muslim Islamic community.
In the Arab world, we have an inherited fear that American company and British director are doing this movie. And then they will say it's pro-Christians. I don't have this fear. I've met Ridley. I've met William Monahan, the scriptwriter. They are good people. They are very objective. And I've read my role. It's a balanced script. I'm not scared.
Well, I hope more than anything, I think that it shows. I know it's hard because the infrastructure is all screwy in the Arab world at the moment, so it's hard to show movies of this size economically to the 500 million Arabs who might be eligible to see it, because there's just not cinema on every street corner like there is in the Western world, and ticket prices alone is a month's wages in many parts of the Arab world. So, I mean, in my ideal world, there would be this is shown to as many Arabs as it is to Westerners, but I realize that's probably not going to happen. So, given the fact that it's going to be seen by a small minority of Arabs and a majority of Westerners, I would just like to see that, for everybody to see that we're all the same. I mean, whether we're Arabs or whether we're French or whether we're American now, although there weren't many Americans in the Crusader times, of course. So hopefully everybody gets that feeling at the end of the day, because that's one of the things that's important about the film, is that humanity is first. We have to look after each other. And people do that in an exemplary fashion throughout the movie, whether it's Balian saving my life at the beginning of the picture, which is a very small incident, or whether it's me saving his life a little bit further on, or whether it's Salah ad-Din saving the lives of thousands of people as after he's defeated Jerusalem. These are gestures of humanity, and I think that that's really what, if anything, the film is marinated in, is that sort of human soup. And I hope that that's what shows. I hope that that's the big impression that people get, where you come out with a feeling of hope about us as people, that we might actually get this together one of these days.
I'll give you an example. I said I have, on a big day in this movie, I have 2,500 people daily. I get out the car, I'm met with 800 Muslim soldiers. They're all saying, "Hi, how you doing?" And they all think it's really funny because they're in 13th century armor, and they're soldiers. They're all Muslim. Then I got part German crew, part Italian, part English, and a lot of local workforce of maybe 1,000 from Ouarzazate, Muslim. We all get along, we make this big movie. So what's the problem? There shouldn't be a problem, but there is. Like this, I know it sounds naive, but it's like really, what's staggering is how simple it ought to be.
We're all talking about one God. We're all talking about this we're all striving for the same things, but for some reason there's this huge conflict, and you know, it's just extraordinary to me that it's still going on now. I mean, even more so, is this stronger than ever. It's becoming really quite frightening, and I don't understand it, quite honestly.
Given the present state of the world, as you so rightly say, I am so confident that the Kingdom of Heaven will do nothing but extreme good for the world. And I've believed in it since I first opened that script, and I will never stop believing in it. And if people don't love it then and move forward inspired by it, then there's no hope left, is there?
It's a very difficult thing when you're making a political statement, intentionally or not. The trouble is, it's going to be looked at as a political statement, whether we like it or not.
There's been a serious attempt to sort of get a controversy going about the movie, you know, long before it comes out. And, you know, if at first you worry about that, and then you just sort of relax. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't micromanage it. You can't even care about it. All that really matters is the work, and the work is done well, and it's inoffensive to anybody. The only thing that matters is we've done a really, really good film. And, you know, it's certainly the best historical picture in a long, long time. So that's all I care about. Some of the reviews were great. I mean, really wonderful and unexpected. But I hoped it would do more in the box office. I hoped it would be, as you hope with any film, that everyone would go and see it. I don't know, it seemed to come and go very quickly.
I don't know anyone who saw it that didn't get something out of it, like even if they found problems with it. I don't know anyone that like came up to me and goes, "Ah, it's the worst movie I ever saw," or, you know, I think it definitely elicited debate and conversation, and I was a little surprised. I thought that people might be more interested in this kind of story about this, you know, kind of individual and what an individual can do, and kind of that, you know, you don't have to be on the side of religion or politics or all this kind of stuff. I thought they would be more into the kind of that storyline, especially given our contemporary world.
I always said from reading the script, I loved it. Seeing the footage, when I saw a very, very long version in the beginning, I loved it. And I thought that, to me, this is probably the most relevant and time-relevant period piece that, I don't know, that I've seen. And coupled with the vision and the adventure and all the stuff, this is going to be great. So it was very disappointing when it didn't hit bigger in the United States than it did. You know, and why that is, you know, who knows?
My only concern is that the movie won't be looked at as what it is, which is something good-hearted and essentially secular. It's not really about religion. The hero has doubts about his faith,
and at no point fails to be ethically Christian through the entire thing. So it says basically use your head and your heart and do the right thing. And I think the Hospitaller says use your head and your heart, you're doing the right thing, then, you know, that's all that God requires, you know. And I think it's true if there is a God, you know, it only makes sense. It certainly doesn't require people cutting off heads.
When we set out, one of the things that we wanted to explore is that fanaticism from anybody is a bad idea. And that's a pretty sophisticated thing to do in a studio movie because it really demands a lot from audiences.
I think the studio were very worried about that being so inflammatory, and I'm going, it's not inflammatory, it's information. It's history. It's why we are where we are. And I think that's how it should have been sold. Instead of just a crash, wallop, bang, action, romantic action movie.
There's always, in a project this expensive, you know, there are reticences that pop up about everything, you know, about everything. It's why movies get processed into sludge, because everybody's spooked about this, or, you know, spooked about this or that, and, you know, it gets over-processed, and all the edges taken off. And it just turns into porridge, you know, porridge which is poured into theaters, you know, and, you know, poured out a couple of weeks later or something, you know, it's just crap.
They tried to make it more generic, which I still say is a danger, is a problem. It's history. They're scared of history, unless it's some dumb look at history where you create some action hero, which is like, please, okay? That's the problem. So you're constantly fighting that.
I was disappointed, I must confess, but I was still very, very proud of the film, and I was really happy that the European audience clicked with it in the ways that the US audience did not. It happens. And I had to kind of extract myself from that, because otherwise I would have been really, potentially really distraught, because I believed in the film. And when you do something like this on this kind of a grand scale, a big part of it is wanting lots and lots of people to see it. And when I say that, it isn't about wanting lots and lots of people to see it and then come up to me personally and tell me how much they love it. What I had been hoping for was for that if it had been seen on a mass level by an audience, it would inspire a dialogue. Let's say more people had seen it and equal parts loved it and hated it. That would have been extremely gratifying for me, because I think there are ideas in the film that are worth stimulating, like I call it incendiary, that these kind of ideas and discussion about these ideas need to be ignited. And I hoped, and maybe it was naive on my part, that a piece of entertainment could ignite that kind of discussion. That was my hope. And because it was a kind of a canvas that is normally seen by lots and lots of people, that was what I had been hoping would happen, and especially in the United States, because I think that in the United States we need to have a more open forum for considering things in a less xenophobic and self-centered way. And I think that this embodies some of those ideas, and if it had reached that audience, it could have potentially inspired that kind of dialogue.
One Muslim said, which I thought was really beautiful when he saw the film, he was a Muslim scholar out of Columbia University, said, "The world is bleeding." That's what he said now, which I thought was a very beautiful way of looking at it, in a way. And he said, the wound was made now, the period that you've chosen. And he said, in a way, the film tries to staunch that flow of blood with discussion, understanding, and love, and beauty. And it's about simply accepting other people's denominations, beliefs, religions, and points of view without going to war.